Hi, I'm Jacqueline.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes. And my laptop sounds like it's about to take off into space.
It does that quite often. I don't know what our computers think we're doing, but they're like ready to go. They're like, we're gearing up.
Yeah.
We are in it for the long haul, you know?
Well, mine was also having an issue where it was like on the charger. I could hear it like making that
Mm-hmm.
noise. And there was a software update, and I did that and thought I fixed the issue until we got on Zoom. And now it's just
It's still going.
hamster wheels running.
Well, at least, knock on wood, our audio quality has been okay the last 2 weeks after our snafu like 3 weeks ago, where it just like was not
That's
great no matter
true.
what we did. No idea what happened that night. That was a very weird night, but thankfully things are hopefully working now. Sounds like they're working at least. I guess we'll
Yeah,
figure that
guess
out
we'll
when we edit
see.
this.
One person's audio is missing the entire time. That
That
would
would
be our
be,
luck.
yeah. Also, I just got a question for my other toddler parents out there. Are we just constantly being bullied? Is that just the life that we signed up for? Because let me tell you, my 2-year-old tonight, she's already talking about what we're going to be for Halloween, of course, because it's March, so we gotta start thinking about
Yeah.
that. You know, it's going to be here before we know it.
Gotta
And
plan ahead.
she exactly, and she wants to be Ariel from The Little Mermaid. So I'm like, cool, perfect, we can do that. And then she said my husband's going to be King Triton. I was like, okay, beautiful. I was like, who's mommy going to be? Ursula. I was like, what? I was like, that's you. She's like, yeah, mommy's Ursula.
You could have been Flounder. You could have been, what's the bird's name?
Oh, what's the bird's name? I know Sebastian
Seagull?
is the crab. I don't know what
Yeah,
the
you could have been Flounder. You could have been Sebastian. God, you could have been, what's the
I could
dog's
have been Prince
name?
Eric, but no, I'm gonna be Ursula.
Yeah. I want to be Ursula. I'm gonna
You
show
would
up.
come join us. Who should Kevin be?
Ariel. Just kidding. What if he also showed up as Ariel? Um,
I bet Millie would love
he
it though,
will be
honestly.
he'll be Prince Eric, and me and Millie will just fight over him all night. You
Perfect. I
could be
love it.
hot Ursula, though. You could be
Okay.
like Ursula when she's like stealing Ariel's voice. When she
Mm.
got that like
Okay.
snatched
Okay.
body and she's like,
Yes.
fall in love with me. You could be that Ursula.
So yeah,
I will.
obviously we got to talk about our Halloween costumes in March, but like why you gotta bully me like that? Like what did I ever do to you? I brought you into this world. I loved you. I
I take
nurtured
care of
you.
you. I feed you. I
Goodness. That's the
love
thanks I
you.
get.
Like,
Right?
I wonder, I'm also excited to see in October if her mind changes
Yeah.
to, is she going to stick with Ariel for the next,
Probably not.
because, toddler brain.
Yeah, they're all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I'm gonna go ahead and put my guess out there that it's going to be a Disney princess because I think she's still gonna be
Hmm.
obsessed with Disney princesses by then. But I don't know which one it's gonna be because last week she wanted to be Rapunzel, and guess who I was gonna be when she was gonna be Rapunzel?
Were you going to be the lizard?
No, I was gonna be Mother
No, you
Gothel.
were, oh, I was like, you were going to be the villain.
Why? Why, Millie? I feel like she's got some issues going on because I'm always the villain and Andrew's always the love interest, and I'm like something's not matching up here, Millie.
Yeah, something. They do say that though, like girls, like,
That's
you
true.
know, like my sister always said she was gonna marry my dad, and then my mom
Yep.
was like, "Oh, you meant someone like your dad?" She was like, "Nope,
She's like,
dad."
nope, just him.
So maybe she's in that phase, but
Yeah, probably. I think Freud wrote something about that. That would make sense.
yeah,
But
she might be Cinderella. You'll be the evil stepmother. She might
yep.
be Belle, and you'll be Gaston.
I will say when we talk about Cinderella though, she says I'm Cinderella. So at least I get one. She's nice.
That's what is she? Is she also Cinderella? Double
No, she's
Cinderella?
Rapunzel. I don't know why. It doesn't make
Oh,
sense. But anytime I'm Cinderella, she's Rapunzel. So I guess those two have morphed in her brain for
yeah,
some reason.
just same movie. I get that.
Yeah, I don't know. Toddler brains, there's a lot going on up there. And sometimes not a whole lot, but they're trying to. Who
They're
knows?
trying. It's
Anyway,
pretty funny.
I know we do have one update before we get into today's episode.
Yes, this update was sent to us by Catherine. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you.
Um, And it looks like in Virginia, an almost 40-year-old cold case is going to hopefully be solved with DNA. So Elroy Harrison was just arrested on charges of first-degree murder, abduction with the intent to defile, aggravated malicious wounding, and breaking and entering with intent to kill. And that is in the death of Jacqueline Lard.
Wow.
So she was murdered in 1986 in Stafford County, Virginia. And also with this DNA, he has publicly been identified as a suspect in the 1989 strangulation of 18-year-old Amy Baker. And that was in Fairfax County, but there's been like no official charges for that. But it is
Hmm.
possible that two very old cases might be being solved with DNA, which is helpful for the families,
Yeah.
At least it's never closure, but at least finally knowing who did this and possibly what happened.
Yeah, definitely. And especially too, if you have too close in location, time frame, in the same area, like how many more could he be responsible for that maybe
Mm,
now they can kind of look back at his life history and see if they have any other cold cases that he could be
yeah,
related to.
that's true. I mean, they might have found a serial killer
Yeah,
for all we know. But yeah, so forensic genealogy
you
comes
love to see
comes in
it.
again.
Yeah.
So we love these cases being solved, people being identified, and hopefully we'll just continue to see more of that.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and get into today's episode, which I'm pretty excited about. So I learned lots of new things, so hopefully you will as well. Our sources included an article from the University of Michigan Bentley Historical Library, um, a New York Times article, a documentary called Kevorkian, the compassionandchoices.org website, and a CNN article. So, Dr. Jacob or Jack Kevorkian was a physician who assisted in more than 100 suicides of terminally ill patients. He's a highly controversial figure and spent his life advocating for assisted suicide or physician assisted death. So, Jack Kevorkian was born Murad Kevorkian in Pontiac, Michigan on May 26, 1928. He was the only son and the second of three children to Levin and Satnig Kevorkian, who were Armenian refugees. His family was very poor, but his father founded and owned a small excavation company. And his sisters Margot and Flora thought very highly of Jack, and the whole family just like put him up on a pedestal. Flora said that he was so smart, like there was nothing he couldn't fix, like genius IQ from the time he was a child, like always tinkering with something, always like
Hmm.
creating things, fixing things, like coming up with all this stuff. So Margot was his older sister, and Flora was his younger sister. And so Margot like served as another maternal role for him. And as a child, he was very interested in art and music. And as a teenager, he taught himself German and Japanese because he anticipated serving in World War II, but the war ended before he was old enough to join the military.
Can you imagine before um what is it? Babbel and Duolingo and
Hmm.
Rosetta Stone being like,
Like,
I'm just gonna learn German and Japanese.
yeah, as a teenager, I'm just gonna teach myself this just in case I
Can
need
you
it.
imagine?
Yeah.
I try to use Duolingo and I can't keep up a 3-day streak. And this
Same.
teenager is just teaching himself.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
that's crazy.
incredible. Yeah, it really is. So he attended the University of Michigan for engineering, but then changed his studies and graduated with a medical degree in clinical pathology in 1952. He did serve in the Korean War, then returned to the University of Michigan for his residency. And during this time, Kevorkian became fascinated with death and the act of dying. So he would visit patients who were terminally ill and would like photograph their eyes to try to determine the exact moment of death so that physicians could understand when resuscitation was no longer possible. Um, and this earned him the nickname Dr. Death. And eventually, like, he would be used, like, when they were starting to, like, harvest organs for organ transplants to know, like, okay, this is exact moment when death occurred, like, before they had machines who could, like, let you
Hmm.
know exactly when that happened.
It makes me think too of like the book, I can't remember what it's called at the moment, where they were trying to like see about like the human soul. And so like they would weigh
Mm,
bodies and then weigh them right after death. Like the
hmm.
soul, does your soul have a weight?
Oh,
You know,
interesting.
like
Yeah.
is your soul leaving your body? So like do you lose weight right when you die
Mm,
because your soul is leaving your body kind of
hmm.
thing? That's what it kind of
Yeah.
like not 100, but quite a few years,
Yeah. But
80-ish
yeah, it's
years
like
before.
things that seem like a given now obviously had to like come from research somewhere, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so I'm not too sure about this next part. So I read this in an article from the University of Michigan, which makes me think it's like legit, but it also was not mentioned in the documentary where Kevorkian what like spoke for most of the documentary. So I'm not quite sure about how accurate this is. But supposedly he proposed that death row inmates be used for medical experiments while they were still alive. And apparently this got him kicked out of his residency. But like he was still a licensed physician. So I'm not really sure how that worked if he like got kicked out of residency, but he still went on to become a licensed physician. And again, this was just in
Hmm.
that article and not mentioned in the documentary. So that may be like a legend kind of thing.
Yeah,
Not
or
quite sure.
I could definitely see him leaving that part out when he's talking about
I
his
mean,
life
that's true
history.
too. But like he had to finish
But
his like residency somewhere to like be a licensed practicing physician. But maybe he had to
yeah.
go somewhere else, or maybe they like kindly kicked him out, like, we don't think you're the best fit here. Like maybe it was that kind of
Yeah.
situation. I don't know.
Hmm.
But also, another article and Kevorkian in the documentary said that he proposed that death row murderers be given the option to be executed with anesthesia so that their bodies could be used for medical experiments and harvesting of their organs, like for organ transplants. So I'm not sure if this is like the same scenario and it was like misinterpreted or if like
Hmm.
one happened and then the other later. So I just want to put all the info out there just in case.
I mean, especially in like the 1950s, I could definitely see them being like, oh, like maybe we should like harvest their organs, being like, oof, you're trying to do these weird medical experiments
Yeah,
kind of thing. Like I could see that being misinterpreted, in the
yeah,
50s.
definitely.
Or revisionist history. We don't know.
Yeah, could be either one. I'm not sure. But he did also propose that doctors transfuse blood from corpses into injured soldiers. And this just contributed to his poor reputation in the medical community. But he had read about Russian soldiers doing this successfully. So he's like, okay, but if we can use the blood of someone who has already died to save the life of someone who is dying, like, shouldn't we look into this? So he applied for a grant to research this, but the grant was denied. I think that's kind of frowned upon. And we know now
Hmm.
probably not the most hygienic of practices.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can see why it's
Ethical.
worth looking into. Like,
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
uh,
Before you have, blood drives happening in every city, like, yeah, you gotta do what you gotta do.
exactly. Especially when you're thinking about like frontline war. Like, it's not like this is just like someone in surgery and they need a blood transfusion.
Hmm.
Like, this is literally like you have thousands of people dying like right here, and like, what can we do to save
Yeah.
anyone's life? You know. But his sister Margot said that no one was really sure why he was so obsessed with death and dying, but obviously this was his passion, his interest, his thing. In the 60s and 70s, he worked as a medical pathologist. His coworkers found him to be like a grim and awkward person who was quick to anger. However, his friends said that he was very personable, witty, and like engaging in private, so kind of seemed like a different person at work and at home. He rarely dated and he never married, and he avoided luxury throughout his life. He often bought old clothing at the Salvation Army to wear. And in 1976, he grew bored with medicine and moved to Long Beach, California, where he spent 12 years painting and writing. He also produced an unsuccessful film and supported himself with two part-time pathology positions at different hospitals. So he's just kind of trying out a bunch of different stuff, seeing what
Yeah.
speaks to him.
Just, yeah, I get that. Sometimes you have a little, don't know what you want to do, so let's just try it all out.
Exactly. And he was a jack of all trades, as we'll see, which is funny because his name was Jack. Anyway, so
Jack of all
and
trades, but master of none.
exactly. But I don't know, I think he was pretty good at some of them. Um, So in 1984, the number of executions in the US was increasing. Go listen to our Patreon episode about that if you want more information. So Kevorkian returned to his idea of allowing prisoners to die by anesthesia so that they could donate their organs. And he was actually invited to speak to members of the California legislature on a bill that would allow prisoners to do just that. And again, it's a choice. No one's being forced to do this, but like making that an option. And he soon became well known as an advocate for the right to die and dying with dignity for terminally ill patients. So, right to die supporters argue that those with terminal, incurable, debilitating illnesses be allowed to choose to die on their own terms instead of waiting for natural death. So, Kevorkian went to the Netherlands in 1987 and studied techniques that physicians use there to legally assist terminally ill patients in suicide. So, Kevorkian's own mother died of cancer after it spread across her entire body. She lost down to 80 pounds and was in constant pain. And Kevorkian and his sisters talked to her doctor to try to get him to help her die, but he refused. And after his mother's death, Kevorkian decided if no one else would do it, he would become a one-man death counselor. So the next year, Dr. Kevorkian began advertising in Michigan newspapers for a new medical practice he called bioethics and obietry, where he would provide death counseling free of charge. So his advertisement in the newspaper read, "Is someone in your family terminally ill? Does he or she wish to die? And with dignity, call a physician consultant." And he was very clear about his intentions and demonstrated his vial of drugs to journalists, which included a sedative and potassium chloride so patients could stop their own heart. So he set up what he called a suicide machine. So basically, the push of a button would dispense the correct medicines in the correct dosage and in the correct order to successfully and peacefully kill the patient. And this machine allowed the patient to push the button themselves so that Kevorkian was not the one actually killing anyone. So that's kind of how he was protecting himself legally. Like he set it up, but he was not the one who like injected the drugs. Also, to protect himself legally, those wishing to utilize his assistance would have to clearly express their wish to die. Kevorkian would have them consult with their family physicians and mental health professionals, and patients were given at least a month to make sure their decision was final. Kevorkian also videotaped interviews with the patients and their family and friends. So, like, he has a pretty strict protocol. He's not just like
Hmm.
anyone who comes to him, he's like, okay, you got it. Like, he's very
Yeah.
diligent about what he's doing. And he called these deaths medicides. On June 4th, 1990, Janet Adkins was the first person to die with Kevorkian's assistance. So she was an Oregon teacher with Alzheimer's. She died inside Kevorkian's van, which was parked at a campground near his house. Kevorkian's sisters were with him during the procedure, and he immediately called the police and informed them of the death afterwards. On the way home, he told his sisters that he hoped to be able to do a few more of these assisted suicides and then write a medical report about it. But he had no idea that he would receive as many requests as he did in the following years. Later, Kevorkian was arrested on the street and charged with first-degree murder for Janet's death. Margot was the one who suggested that Kevorkian retain attorney Jeffrey Feiger, who was an experienced trial lawyer for medical and legal cases. Janet's husband Ron and their two sons held a press conference in Portland the next day and read Janet's suicide note. And that day, Kevorkian was interviewed by the New York Times, and his cause now became national news. He said that responsibilities of the medical profession should include assisting patients with dying, and he wished to make euthanasia a positive experience for patients. So the judge did end up throwing out the murder charges, and Kevorkian was free to go. Over the next 8 years, Kevorkian estimated that he assisted 130 patients with taking their own lives. Patients would travel from across the country to visit him in Detroit, and his sister Margot worked for him and handled all of his appointments, letters, videotaping, like the administrative stuff. Kevorkian also would not assist children or mentally incompetent adults. The medication was often administered in homes, cars, or campgrounds. He was arrested many times, but the Michigan governor and health authorities had to spend years trying to legally stop Kevorkian from assisting with these suicides. In 1991, a state judge issued a permanent injunction that prohibited Kevorkian from using his suicide machine. Later that year, his license to practice medicine was suspended by the state. In 1993, Michigan approved a statute that outlawed assisted suicide, but it was later declared unlawful by a state judge and the Court of Appeals. However, in 1994, the Michigan Supreme Court ruled that assisting in the suicide was a common law felony and that there was no protected right to suicide assistance under the state constitution.
So Dr. Kevorkian liked the attention his many arrests and court hearings brought him, along with the opportunity to raise awareness for his cause. During one arrest in 1993, he refused to post bond and then went on a hunger strike the next day. Another time, he fought with police during his arrest, and during his third trial in April of 1996, he arrived to court wearing colonial-era clothing to demonstrate how antiquated he thought the charges were. He also wrote 7 books during his career. So Dr. Kevorkian went on trial a total of 4 times from May 1994 to June 1997 for the deaths of 6 of his patients. He was acquitted for the first 3 trials, and the fourth was declared a mistrial. And Kevorkian was growing restless with the legal system because he kept getting charged but never convicted. And he said the issue needed to be decided for sure, like either make this illegal or don't. He told Margot that he needed to go to jail for his cause, and she told him it was stupid to go to jail on purpose. And they were fighting and weren't speaking to each other when Margot suddenly died of a heart attack. On September 17th, 1998, Kevorkian assisted in the death of Thomas Uke, who was suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease. In addition to his normal consents and procedures, this time Kevorkian actually videotaped the death itself. Kevorkian gave Thomas a consent form, and Thomas consented to Dr. Kevorkian being the one to administer the drugs himself instead of using the suicide machine like the others had. On the video, you can see Dr. Kevorkian administer the lethal medication and then Thomas pass away. Kevorkian sent the videotape to 60 Minutes, who broadcast it on November 22nd, which wild.
It
Just
really is. Like, it really is.
just broadcasting a man dying.
Like, he's literally like, here's a videotape of me legally murdering this person. Put it out there. And they were like, okay. And they did. And the video is out there. Like, you see this man dying, and it was just on 60 Minutes.
That is insane.
Yeah.
Administering the medicine himself crossed the line from assisted suicide to murder. So the 60 Minutes broadcast initiated a national conversation about medical ethics and media responsibility, which was Kevorkian's goal. And it was also the prime evidence for a murder trial against Dr. Kevorkian. On 60 Minutes, Kevorkian said, quote, "They must charge me. Either they go or I go. If they go, that means they'll never convict me in a court of law. If I go to prison, I'll starve myself to death. So either they go or I go." So it took a while for prosecutors to charge Kevorkian after the video aired, and Kevorkian told a friend if he wasn't charged soon, he would do another on one on the prosecutor's front steps.
He was committed to going to prison.
He
Like,
really was. Like,
he's
I
like,
don't know
do
if
it.
we've
Do it.
ever done a case where someone has like begged to go to prison.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I didn't know all of these details.
I didn't either. He was finally charged, and against his attorney's advice, Kevorkian decided to represent himself. He was alone with Thomas during the death on purpose because he knew he would end up going to prison and didn't want anyone else to get in trouble. He later said he didn't want Feiger involved because he wanted to get convicted, and he felt that he needed to settle whether or not suicide was a constitutional right. Essentially, he was calling their bluff. He was like, "Come on."
Yeah, he's like, you keep saying I can't do this, but also I keep doing it, and you're not stopping me. So what are you gonna do
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. So the judge who presided over his trial said, quote, "You had the audacity to go on national television, show the world what you did, and dare the legal system to stop you. Well, sir, consider yourself stopped." Which, I mean, yeah, you can't. I
Yeah,
mean,
that is what happened.
Dr. Kevorkian was found guilty of second-degree murder on March 26, 1999. He was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison, but after 8 years, he was released on June 1st, 2007, after promising not to participate in any more assisted suicides. He had been diagnosed with hepatitis C back in 1963 and was in poor health at the time of his release from prison. He said he wasn't angry about going to prison. I mean, he was begging to go to prison.
Right.
And that he had no regrets about it, except he wished it wasn't at the end of his life. He received 4 to 5 letters a day while in prison from family members of people he had helped or others who wished to receive his help. And the conditions of his parole included that he was not allowed to work in a position providing care for another person, was not allowed to care for adults over age 62 or mentally incompetent adults, and that he could not be present at or participate in any assisted suicides. If asked for advice, Kevorkian would refer people to a journal where he wrote about the process, since he could not share the information with them without violating his parole. So he was like, "I cannot tell you, but if you look at this journal,
Exactly.
you
He's
will
like,
find your
I
answer."
can't help you, but I also wrote all about it over here before if you want to go read that.
Yeah. Which this one I feel like is such a confusing one. I mean, obviously he's going to prison because he's like
Mhm.
taunting and begging to go to prison.
Yeah.
But like he did have all these things in place where he's just helping people.
Hmm.
Like,
And
so
that's
it
the
is
thing.
kind
I don't
of,
think he ever would have actually gone to prison if he hadn't crossed the line that he knew he was crossing. Like he
yeah,
obviously did this on purpose, but it's like with the way things kind of were legally, like you were helping people in the way that you were, but
yeah,
he had to make a statement. He had to make a stand. He had to go to
he
prison for
did.
8 years for it, I guess.
Yeah. However, his release from prison wasn't the end of Kevorkian's work. While in prison, he learned about the Ninth Amendment to the Constitution, which reads, the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Yeah, no, it doesn't make sense. But according to study.com, in
I
simple
was like, I
terms,
have to look this up of like, what does
I
this
know, thank
actually
God you
mean?
did, because I was like reading through and I was like, I have no idea what that is.
Because he like said it in the documentary and he was like, aha, this is it. I was not guilty. And I'm like, oh, what does that
What
say?
does that
In what
mean?
way does that mean that?
Yeah. So in simple terms, this means the rights of citizens will be protected, whether these rights are listed or not, and also leaves what rights are not listed as an opportunity for interpretation, which is still not really making sense.
No,
Um,
still not clear, but at least I understand why he thought that
a
would
little
fall
bit more.
under that now. Yeah.
Yeah. This honestly seems like something in the Constitution being like, yeah, all your rights are protected.
Yeah, just
They
all of
might
them.
not be listed, but they're protected.
You figure out what ones they actually are, but yeah, they're protected, sure.
Yeah.
We just won't specify
Um,
which ones. That's not our
yeah,
job.
you got to figure that out,
Yeah.
but not us. We're not going to figure that out. So he fully believed this amendment included the right to die by suicide. He later said he believed abortion fell under this amendment as well, and that everyone has the right to an abortion, which, hey, yeah, I like that one.
I thought it was funny too because someone like asked him like his views on abortion, and he was like, "Oh, I thought you were going to ask me hard questions. Of course, everyone has the right to an abortion." Like it was just such a great answer.
Yeah, he was like, oh, like that one's easy.
Yeah, he's like, no, this isn't hard."
Yeah. With his new fascination with the Ninth Amendment, he decided he wanted to fight for individual rights and run for Congress. He participated in the debates and was on the ballot, but didn't come close to winning.
It was also funny in the documentary because like they like thoroughly covered like his run for Congress, which there wasn't a whole lot else to say about it because I mean he didn't win.
Hmm.
But the night of the election, like his attorney came in and he was like, "All right, guys," he's like, "We got a really really like neck and neck race over here. You're not in it, but the other two guys are like right there." Like he's like, "You aren't even like close."
Yeah. Whenever
But
you
it was
run
really
as an
funny.
independent, it's so, I mean, not that it doesn't happen, but it's
Yeah.
very rare that,
Yeah, because they said like they weren't sure, like because like we think he's gonna get like enough votes to have like a Ralph Nader effect and like take away the nomination like from someone else. But they're like, yeah, no, you didn't even like do that. Which I don't think
no.
he ever intended on winning. I think he just wanted a platform to speak about his cause, you know?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So Kevorkian had many interests and talents and had very dark paintings and sculptures about death and the act of dying displayed in an art exhibit in the Armenian Library and Museum of America. One of them was painted with his own blood, which
Hmm.
um, I'm not sure about the like sanitary storing of that. There's a word I'm looking for and I just can't place
Uh,
it.
Especially since he also had hepatitis C, which I feel like is
Yeah, yeah, bloodborne
maybe
pathogens here. Blood.
yeah, maybe you don't want your blood out there on your artwork. But I mean his artwork was really good. Like he was pretty talented
Hmm.
actually. Like is I was
Yeah.
surprised.
So he wrote music, wrote 7 books, and created many inventions, including round playing cards, a bicycle without a chain, and an envelope that could be opened with dental floss. He would often do something, master it, then move on to something else. So he would kind of be like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be great at it, and then I'm just going
Hmm.
to move on to the next
Yeah.
thing.
He's like, oh, cool. Like, I did this really awesome thing. Okay, what's next? What can I get into next? Like, always
Yeah,
looking for something to add to his
to do.
repertoire.
Yeah. So we mentioned earlier that he produced a movie while living in California, and he was obsessed with Handel's Messiah and decided to make it into a movie. He spent his life savings and hired actors and rented a room up above a garage in California. And at the end of his life, he said he didn't want to talk about it because it was lousy and a stupid mistake and not worth talking about. So I guess it didn't work out too well.
It was very funny because
Um,
they showed like clips of it in the documentary, and you could tell like it wasn't like a well-produced movie. I mean,
yeah.
obviously he wasn't a professional at that and whatever, but like they asked him about it and he's just like, I don't want to talk about that. Like that was stupid. It was bad. It's not worth talking about. Next.
Next.
He's like, let's talk about my painting, let's talk about my music. I don't want to talk about that.
Yeah. Talk about these round playing cards. Anything else? Not that
Right.
movie. He did say the biggest thing he regretted in his life is not getting married. So Dr. Kevorkian died at William Beaumont Hospital in Royal Oak, Michigan on June 3rd, 2011. He was 83 years old. He was admitted to the hospital shortly before his death with kidney problems, liver complications, and pneumonia. And Kevorkian's long-term attorney, Jeffrey Feiger, said Kevorkian wished he had the option at that point in his life that he'd been given to so many others. And Feiger said if he had the strength to leave the hospital, Kevorkian would have chosen to die on his own terms. So, Oregon was the first state to make assisted suicide legal in 1997, and it wasn't until 2009 that Washington and Montana made it legal as well. Since 2013, Vermont, California, Colorado, Washington, D.C., Hawaii, New Jersey, Maine, and New Mexico have passed assisted suicide laws. Assisted suicides can only be done by a physician for terminally ill patients with less than 6 months life expectancy. And in Montana, a court ruling has to determine that someone can go through with assisted suicides. You kind of have to, I guess, go before a judge.
Mhm.
Um, and it is usually referred to as physician assisted death now. Most states have a residency law requiring you to be a resident of the state for at least 6 months prior to a physician assisted suicide to prevent people from moving to or visiting the state just for that purpose. But Vermont was the first state to repeal this requirement in 2023, which I did not hear about. But
Nope.
I mean, it makes sense. If you have to have less than a 6 month life expectancy, then you have to live somewhere for 6 months.
Exactly. It's like
Um,
it's only accessible if you already live in that state. So you're just limiting how many people have access to that.
mhm. Which I do remember this making a lot of news with I can't remember her name. I think it was Brittany something. She was kind of one that was like very, very
Yeah,
vocal
this sounds
about
familiar.
let me see if I can look it up. Like I feel like I remember her being on like People magazine. Okay,
Yeah.
Brittany Maynard, who
Hmm.
had she was terminally ill. I remember she would have like really, really bad seizures. And she just kind of became an advocate for, you know, assisted suicide or physician
Hmm.
assisted death or and I remember like that was a hot topic of debate. I remember
Yeah.
people were so torn on that.
It is like I
um
think it still is today. I think it's something that a lot of people really wrestle with, especially with a lot of religions believing that suicide is a sin flat out, that like you will not go to
mhm,
heaven or wherever else if you die in this manner. So like a lot of people are against it for that reason because they think that someone is not going to end up where they want to in
mhm.
the
It's like
afterlife.
a unforgivable sin, I
Hmm.
guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did look it up more and she had brain cancer and like incurable brain
Hmm.
cancer. And she had to move from California to Oregon
Mm.
to participate in it. So
Hmm.
and she was only 29. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
remember
that
that
was
she
another
was
thing that
young.
was but yeah, I she always stands out in my mind because I mean, she was very vocal about it and was like, "Hey, like I have no quality of life right now. Like,
Hmm.
I'm going to die. Why shouldn't I die on my own terms?"
And that's the thing, like most people that have an opinion about this have never been in that position to know what they
Hmm.
would do if they were in that position. So they're making decisions for other people when they've never experienced something like that themselves. Like the videotapes that Kevorkian took of Janet Atkins, who was the first person to die with him, like I mean, she's just like sobbing and like she looks like she doesn't look ill. Like she had Alzheimer's. She was, I
Hmm.
think, in her 50s or 60s. Like she doesn't look like she's extremely ill, but she's like, I just want out. She's like, I just want out of this
Yeah.
body. Like I can't lived like this. You don't know what it's like to live like not being in control of your mind. And he's like, well, what do you say to the people who, your kids, your grandkids, and she's like, I'm so sorry, but I just want out. And it's like she knows what she wants and she knows that this isn't how she wants to live. And it's hard to argue that someone shouldn't have the right to make that own decision for themselves, you know?
And especially knowing a lot of these like Alzheimer's where you die because your brain forgets how to function. So you
Exactly.
lose so much of yourself and then you're really only dying when it like gets to a point where it's like your brain forgets to make the body run, which is obviously like one of the last stages. So it's like
Hmm.
you have to spend all this time having a full-time caregiver, not really knowing who you are, where you are, confusion, and like
A
knowing,
long process a lot of times.
and especially like if you've known also someone with Alzheimer's and then you know that that's going to be you and like what your family will have to go through, you're like, yeah, I'd rather not do
Hmm.
that.
Yeah,
Like I
definitely.
totally get it personally.
And
I don't
like,
it's hard for me to like imagine because I'm like, oof, that would be really tough. Like, because I think now I think they prescribe you the pills, but like you have
hmm
to take them. It's not,
yeah,
yeah. So I'm like, that would be like so like I can't imagine myself being in that position being like, well,
yeah.
if I take this, like, I mean, obviously if I was terminally ill, I would, but
Hmm.
like I'm sure it's also not an easy decision for people to be like,
Exactly. And I think that's what a lot of people need to consider. Like, I don't think anyone is making that decision lightly. Like, this isn't
yeah,
like, and not to be morbid, but people have that option whether or not they're doing it painlessly. So why won't we let them do it painlessly? Like,
yeah,
people for centuries have been dying by suicide at their own hand in a way that is painful, is traumatic to those who find them, who have to deal with the cleanup, who
hmm.
have to deal with all of that. And there's this option where they can do it painlessly, where everyone knows it's coming, where you can prepare, where no
You
one
can
has to
have
deal with the
like the
aftermath. Like,
perfect day and you can be surrounded
exactly,
by family and you can have it be a good experience and not be your family having to watch you like, be not you and all of
exactly.
that. Like,
Yeah. Like, I fully think that everyone should have that right and that
hmm
decision to make for themselves. Because that's the thing, no one else is making this decision for you. This isn't something that you are deciding for someone else. Like you have to be mentally competent in order to
hmm
get this prescription. It's not like
And you
you're
have
like,
to be
oh,
like,
I
have like a terminal illness. Like, they're not just going to give
exactly.
it to you like for anything else, for any other like mental health issues, or you just being like, hey, I don't want to be here anymore. And they're like,
I
okay,
mean,
cool.
that's
Which,
the
I mean,
thing,
there's
like
options to do it anyway, but like,
exactly. Because that's the thing, like the laws are so specific. Like you have to have a terminal illness with less than 6 month life expectancy. A lot of times with Alzheimer's or some other illness like that, that your quality of life is going to be very poor. You may not have that short of a life expectancy. So you may not even be
hmm
eligible in these circumstances for something like this.
yeah.
But yeah, very controversial topic. But Dr. Kevorkian, I feel like, is the most well-known person around this topic. But yeah, I learned a lot in this episode that I didn't know about him and his time in prison and that he essentially begged to go to prison for this cause.
I
And
know. That's kind of funny.
yeah, I mean, he
Like,
seems like a very interesting character for sure.
yeah.
All right, that being said, Courtney, what is your perk of the week?
So I'm doing a double perk of the week because it's my podcast and I can. Um,
It's my podcast. I can double perk of the
do I
week
perk
if I
if I
want
want to?
to.
Okay, so my first perk of the week is that on Sunday, so for my mom's birthday back in January, I bought her tickets to see Hadestown, which is like a Broadway musical, and I didn't know anything about it except I had been told it was really good. So, my mom loves these kind of gifts of like experiences, especially like
Hmm.
Broadway musicals. She loves getting dressed up and going to dinner and going to the Tennessee Theater. She loves it. So,
Yeah.
um, we went and it was so good. It
Good.
was so well done. Like all of like the like actors and stuff, like their voices were like incredible. Like they had a
Nice.
set of pipes on them, every single one. And it was just so cool. They had kind of like Hamilton does with like their rotating stage, which I love.
Hmm.
I love a rotating stage in a musical that's like them like walking and turning and all that stuff. I love it. They had like lights that were doing really cool stuff it was just a
Hmm.
very like well done production. I love these
Hmm.
more like newer age musicals that are kind of not only bringing in like audience participation a little bit, but also like, you know, just these more like cool effects also.
Yeah.
Um, so that is my perk of the week. And that was just going to be my perk of the week, and I was going to move on. But today I finished a book that I feel like
Oh.
I must tell everyone about
Hmm.
because this may sound dramatic, but it is quite possibly now in my top five favorite books of all time.
Wow.
I
That's
know
a
that's a big
big
sell.
statement. That is a
That's a big
big
sell,
statement.
but it is called As Long as the Lemon Tree Grows.
Okay.
Um, I don't know how to pronounce the author's name. I'm really sorry, but she is Syrian, and it's kind of um like one review was like calling it like a love letter to Syria, but it's,
Hmm.
this girl who is in Syria, and the, Free Syrian Army and the Syrian government start fighting, and it's like her experience in this like devastating time of bombs and mass kill, like all of this horrible stuff. But like the way I cried, like every chapter of this book,
Hmm.
and like I don't know, it's just so good. Ashton recommended it to me. Like I was texting her, and she was like, I think about this book like every day still. Like it
Wow.
has stuck with me, and
Hmm.
it was beautiful, and it was gut wrenching, and it was heartbreaking, and it was amazing. And
Those are always the best books. I mean,
and apparently it's this author's debut novel.
wow.
Um,
Impressive.
and she just, yeah. And like in her note, she was like, I wanted to talk about the conflict in Syria, and like a lot of like what I put in this book are true stories and real
Hmm.
stories and like real things that happened. And like, but I also didn't want you to just like, I wanted you to think of people like
Hmm.
when you think of it. So it was especially emotional, especially thinking of like everything going on in the world right now.
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
oh, it was so good.
Do you own this book or do I have to borrow it?
You have to borrow it, but I did
Okay.
put it on my Amazon wish list because I was like, I have to own this book. Like literally, like Kevin kept being like, and I was like, like crying,
Oh
sobbing at this
gosh.
book. I don't know.
It sounds really beautiful.
It was beautiful. It was. It was just, and then I saw our Steph Reads a Lot made a TikTok
Mm.
about it, who she was
Oh,
just like,
okay.
this book is mind blowing. So I hope I didn't hype it up too much for anybody, but I don't know. It's just it's one of those books that's going to stick with me probably for
Hmm.
the rest of my life. And if I think about it too hard, I'll start crying again. So,
Well, I can't wait to read it, and I will definitely let you know my thoughts
yeah,
afterwards.
yeah, it is kind of heavy. So
Hmm.
don't be like me and read like three heavy books in a row, and then it's hard. But yeah, just everyone go read that book because it was amazing. And let me know what you think. There's probably people out there who hate it and don't think it was that good, but
I mean,
I
that's how it
loved
is with
it.
every book. Like there's never going to be a
Yeah,
book that speaks to every single person, you know?
yeah, yes. So those are my perks of the week.
Sounds like a
Jacqueline, what
great
is your
week.
perk of the week?
So my perk of the week is that as of 2 days ago, the time has changed. So we have sunlight
I knew it.
past.
I knew this was going to be your perk of the week. I knew it.
I'm
We
pretty
sat down and
sure.
I was like, hers is going to be that the sun is still up at 7:30.
I'm pretty sure it's been my perk of the week every March since we started this podcast. But it's just such a change in perspective. Like, I don't know, it's just so glorious. Like, and it's been warm weather
Hmm.
the last 2 days, which have helped
Yeah.
because sometimes this time of the year it's like, oh, the time changes, but then it's still cold, so you're not really outside that much. But like, it's just been gorgeous the last 2 days, and then the sun's out till 7 p.m. and
Yeah.
it just brings so much light, literally and figuratively, into the world, and I just
Yeah.
love
The
it. And it
last
makes me
three
so
nights, Kevin will
happy.
be like, look outside. Look at the clock. Look outside. Look
Millie is so
outside.
confused when it's time to come inside and eat dinner because she's like, it's not dark yet. I'm like, no, it's not. Like,
Yeah. My coworker was like, I can no longer convince my son to go to bed at 6:30 now.
right? You're like, no, wait a minute, the sun is still out. This is confusing because she's
Yeah.
used to like, oh, we have to go inside because it's dark, and then we go eat dinner, and then we do
Hmm.
our nighttime routine. And now she's like, but the sun's still out. Like, why can't I be out here?
Yeah.
Which just means it's almost time to start eating dinner outside, which is like gonna be a whole new perk of the week because that's another one of my
I
favorite
know.
things.
I'm so
Um,
excited to get out of winter.
yes.
It's just, I need the seasonal depression to just, whew.
I know it's been a long winter. We got Millie this like little like magnetic calendar, so we do like the days of the week and all
Hmm.
that stuff. And it has like the season, and like every day I'm like, and it's still winter, and it's still winter.
It's
Like
still
that's just
fucking winter.
it's still winter. I also saw a really funny TikTok talking about the time change, and she's like, I woke up this morning and I was like, oh, darn, I lost an hour of sleep, but then tonight the sun's still out, and I'm like, wow, I found the will to live. I just thought it was so funny.
I know. I did see like some TikToks that were like, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but the sun being out is now the reason I will continue living. Thank
Yes,
you.
literally life changing. Like, oh, it's so nice.
Yes.
Anyway, let us know your perks of the week, your thoughts on this episode in a very respectful, conversational manner. We're not
Hmm.
trying to have a fight with anybody, but we would love to
No, I
discuss.
mean, yeah, if you disagree with it due to personal, religious, whatever reasons, that is completely fine and that is
Mhm.
for you, but please don't force that on someone else, and
Yes,
please be respectful if you try to message us about it.
exactly. Let us know how you feel about the time change. Let us know if you're in a state that the time doesn't change and you're like, y'all are insane. Please stop talking about this.
It's true. If you're in Hawaii or Arizona,
Yep.
those are the only two I can think of off the top of my head.
Yeah, I feel like there's one more that like maybe like part of the state does and part doesn't. Courtney's looking it up because I'm just gonna talk out my ass. So
Um, I'm not seeing it, but that did sound
I probably just made it up. That
familiar.
that sounds like
But
me.
it's also saying because technically there's five US territories also that don't observe daylight
Okay.
savings. And Arizona does, with the exception of the Navajo Nation.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. So yeah, let us know your thoughts on all these things.
Hmm.
You guys know where to find us on all the things. And most importantly, we are on patreon.com/caffeinated crimes, where we have monthly bonus episodes. I think we're doing a Q&A this month. We have
Hmm.
some other fun perks. You can chat with us in Discord about this episode or life or anything else. We have pins and stickers and gifts and just all kinds of fun little things. Also, don't know if we've mentioned in a while. We mentioned it like back in September, but we're going to CrimeCon in May, which is
We
coming up
are
very soon. Well, I guess it's
two
technically June.
months.
It's like June 1st, right? Anyway,
Yeah, it's like May
I think we
31st
get there
to
May
June.
31st, but I think it doesn't start until
I
June
thought we
1st. Or
got there
maybe it
May
starts.
30th and it starts May 31st. Let me look at a calendar.
I don't know. It's
Man,
May,
we just
June-ish,
talk out of our butts all the time.
about things that we
Okay.
should know because it's our own damn
So we
schedule,
get
but
there
we
Thursday, the 30th,
the
but it starts
30th.
the 31st, and then it's the 1st and the 2nd.
That okay, so I'm thinking of the day I took off work, which was just the 31st because we're going the 30th after work, so I didn't have to take off work that day. Anyway, so
Yeah.
that's why my brain was stuck on the 31st. But yes, May 30th through June 2nd, we will be
Hmm.
in Nashville for CrimeCon. So if you are there, please come say hi to us. Let us know if you're going to be there. We can chat, we can do all the things.
Yes. And if you wouldn't mind, thank you to our newest person who gave us a 5-star review.
Yes, thank
Um,
you.
But if you want to be like them, please give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever has a reviewing system. If you wouldn't mind to like and subscribe on YouTube, leave a nice comment over there. Yeah, but in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.